Seeing none, that moves us to number 9 on our agenda, the approval of the minutes of the June 12th, 2023 board meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hogan?
I'd like to make the motion the board approve the minutes of the June 12th, 2023 board meeting.
Do I have a second? Mr. Scully? Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes? Motion carries 7-0, and that moves us to public participation. And just a disclaimer before we start, the board welcomes and encourages public participation. We respectfully ask that you adhere to the procedures provided in Board Policy BEDH, public participation at meetings. Your comments should be limited to 3 minutes and must remain on either the topic noted on your sign-in form or a listed agenda item. Questions asked during public participation will be handled in accordance with Board Policy BEDH, and I believe we have 9 speakers. All right, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, our first speaker tonight is Stephanie Berquist, who's here to talk about board policy.
Hey, how is everybody? All right, so I'm here today to talk to parents, board members, community members, teachers, anybody who's paying attention. I don't know if everybody knows, but Little Columbia, South Carolina, in the greater Columbia area, has now made national news twice in the last 2 weeks. That's big time news for us here in South Carolina, and there's been some interesting things going on. The first thing that made national news was the South Carolina Freedom Caucus versus Lexington 1 lawsuit, of which Lexington 1, who's a neighboring district, has now been demanded to remove and disconnect themselves from emotional learning, critical race theory. All funds are now required under this lawsuit to be severed. And as we know, what happens in neighboring districts affects every district in the area. So that's very important. The second story here is right here in this district. We now know that there have been teachings in a school here in this district of systemic racism. There have been assignments given on systemic racism. These topics are very uncomfortable and inappropriate. I will quote from this book in question. One of the books in question here, and I quote, said, "White America is a syndicate to dominate and control our bodies." Okay, this is not only inappropriate and divisive, this is illegal, according to our South Carolina proviso. Not only is it illegal according to the current proviso, we now have precedent that has been set just a week or 2 prior or before, forgive me the timeline, in the Lexington 1 lawsuit. These things are happening locally. They are important, and it is imperative that every board in the Columbia area and in South Carolina follow these regulations. We had students email some board members that said they feel ashamed to be white after reading these books and being assigned these assignments. Again, this is not only inappropriate, it's illegal. We, the parents, are tired. We're tired. It's been a long time. We've made a lot of progress, but it's been a long time and we're tired. I understand today that a cease and desist letter was sent to the board members today. These things are simply insanity. It is insane that I'm standing up here talking about this. And so why am I here today, right? I want to ask that this be added to the agenda, whether the next meeting or shortly after. This topic needs to be discussed. It needs to stop in this district. We need to ensure that we're following the proviso in all of the neighboring districts. We now have law to stand behind that, and you have neighboring districts that are setting precedent for this. Lastly, I want to thank one of the board members here who took these emails. We all know who this is, but I'll just keep the names off the record. But there is one board member here who took this into consideration and really brought this to light, and so we really appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, next we have Celise Sobotovsky of Chapin here to talk about teacher teaching CRT.
Good evening. My name is Celise Sobotovsky. I have a daughter at Chapin High School. I'm speaking tonight regarding the Chapin teacher who made state and national news for illegally teaching CRT. I would like to thank I guess I can't say her name, I would like to thank the board member or members of this, in this board who put a stop to this teacher's so-called AP lesson. I was surprised to find that this teacher is still employed at Chapin High, especially as she showed no remorse and strongly offended herself after she broke the law. She stated that she, quote, fears the policing of teachers' lessons will end up pushing more teachers out of the profession, unquote. First of all, this so-called policing of teachers is called enforcing the law. Second, this district adopted a resolution last year which states that parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's education, and we have a right to direct our children's education. In fact, it's my God-given right to do that anyway. This assignment was for the purpose of writing an argumentative essay. There's plenty of other subject material out there, but she chose systemic racism, and there's an agenda there. Not only that, but she presented only one side. The 2 videos she made her students watch were offensive and clearly designed to make white kids feel guilty for being white and portray black people and other people of color as victims because of discrimination or events which took place many years ago, some of them centuries ago. America is a land of opportunity, not of oppression, as our own Senator Tim Scott recently stated. These videos, as well as the rest of this assignment, are clear violations of State Proviso 1.93. But what's to stop her or anyone else from doing it again if there were no consequences the first time? District 5 needs a policy not only to stop teachers from breaking the law, but to impose consequences when they do. And I believe these decisions should be dictated by our elected board, not delegated to only the principal and the superintendent. I would also like to see an updated nepotism policy. I'm sending my children to school for an education, not indoctrination, and I want teachers, not activists. Thank you.
Janet Howell of Chapin is here to speak about CRT.
Good evening. I'm Janet Howell. I am a new resident here to South Carolina. First time I've ever attended a school board meeting, I believe. I have grandchildren who will be coming here soon. First of all, you opened the meeting with a prayer. That was awesome. I hope that means we're all Christians on this board. I am very concerned about the incident with this teacher. It's been brought to my attention in the past few weeks. And the most important thing, or the most concerning thing, is that I've been told there was no disciplinary action taken. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you board members, but was there any discipline involved in this? Or will there be? If there has not, what disciplinary actions will be taken? And that needs to make the news as well as other things. Because of this one incident, I think you're going to have more eyes watching everything that you as a superintendent, you as principals, teachers, board members are doing for our community. And remember, board members, you are elected by your constituents, and we ask that you remember this. South Carolina is a conservative state. Many of us moved here for that reason, and we ask that you continue this reputation. You as board members have our children's futures in your hands, and the decisions you make have long-lasting effects on the children and our community. Thank you.
Dr. Tricia Kling of Chapin is here to speak about CRT.
Good evening, and I thank you for allowing me the privilege to speak before you all. My name is Tricia Kling, and I am here to speak on behalf of other professionals and parents like myself who hold the same stance regarding critical race theory, or CRT. I am adamantly opposed to allowing any space in our schools for this divisive theory or rhetoric. I have served as an educator for the last 30-plus years, and I have a doctorate in educational leadership with an emphasis in educational psychology. Most of my years have been either in teaching, administration, or as a school psychologist. In my experience, I can guarantee you that CRT is counterintuitive to truly teaching our students social-emotional learning, or SEL, which emphasizes the soft skills, as you know, that we critically need in today's society. We need to emphasize the tenets of SEL: self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Using SEL as a front or a guise to promote CRT is egregious. It's illegal here. I have seen a rise, personally, I have seen a rise in my profession in anxiety, depression, hopelessness, and self-hatred of all races and ethnicities since the introduction of CRT. That breaks my heart as a professional who advocates strongly for children, as it should you. This is certainly not the intention or the intended outcome for SEL. CRT, as you know and are aware, serves to divide, demoralize, and demean through a Machiavellian lens, whereas SEL works to build cohesive and restorative relationships. Therefore, I strongly advise you, when this comes up behind closed doors, that you stay far, far away from anything that promulgates CRT. Thank you for your time.
RJ May is here to talk about CRT.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. A number of parents asked me to be here to share my thoughts as it relates to the South Carolina Freedom Caucus and our recent settlement agreement with Lexington School District 1. For those of you who don't know, I was a plaintiff in that case. We were provided information where Lexington School District 1 was enabled by EL Education to teach critical race theory derived ideas, which is obviously illegal as it relates to the budget proviso and hopefully codified into permanent law through the Transparency in Education Bill. But on behalf of the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, I would like to thank the board members who take this issue seriously. Our Constitution serves equality under the law. Equality under the law is a deeply held American value. What critical race theory derived ideas does, diversity, equity, inclusion, it seeks to supplant that idea of equality under the law with equity under the law. The Supreme Court has held in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence states that we should be a colorblind society, one that values merit and success as opposed to one that views people as oppressor or oppressed because of the color of their skin. What EL Education, critical race theory derived ideas, critical race theorists, and those who subscribe to the racist nonsense that is diversity, equity, inclusion, they seek to get rid of our Constitution and our deeply held Declaration of Independence that says all men are created equal. So those board members who are taking this issue seriously, I thank you. They also, those being the critical race theorists, believe in anti-racism. Anti-racism, of course, a Kendi definition would be that the only way to make up for historical wrongdoings is present discrimination and future discrimination. Legal discrimination in today's day and age. Of course, that would violate our Constitution. It would violate the idea of a colorless and colorblind society. So again, I thank those members of the board who are taking this issue seriously. We are currently still engaged in legal avenues against Charleston School District, but are happy to engage in more when we believe that that budget proviso has been violated. So any members of the board, if you are fighting critical race theory derived ideas, diversity, equity, inclusion that seeks to separate and only look through the lens of race, if you are fighting that, you have an ally in members of the Freedom Caucus, particularly J. Kilmartin, who represents a large portion of this district, and I would encourage you to reach out. I've got 20 seconds left and happy to take any questions if that would be appropriate, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe White is here to speak about CRT.
Thank you. I'm State House Representative for all of Newberry County and one precinct in Chapin. The people of South Carolina have spoken pretty loudly to us legislators about what they think about how we're spending education money. All I'm asking tonight is that each one of you write down my name and my telephone number and call me or text me so that I can meet with each one of you individually, because I need to talk one-on-one with the superintendent, with each one of the school board members, because I need to find out where you're coming from and let you find out where I'm coming from. So my telephone number is 803-429-9423. Thank you.
We have Renee Kelly from Chapin, who's here to speak about CRT.
Thank you for your attention tonight. We, the parents, stand here before you as the primary stakeholders in our children's education. I do appreciate all you members taking on the great responsibility of your position. I do want to remind everyone of the oath of office that was taken. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I'm duly qualified according to the Constitution of this state to exercise the duties of the office to which I've been elected, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties thereof and preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of this state and of the United States, so help me God. Among the responsibilities as a board member is to adhere to the ethical principles, which is also available on the website. According to that, some of those are things such as avoiding conflicts of interest and refrain from using the board position for personal or partisan gain. Also to support legislation and funding which will improve the educational opportunities and environment for students and staff. I do want to commend the bravery of this particular board member and hope all of you will join me in applauding her for taking on this role seriously and bringing to light the recent violations of the South Carolina proviso. Due to that recent violation, the AP English assignment had a memoir on racism. This did cause several students to feel uncomfortable because of the color of their skin. It is not difficult to see that this is in direct violation of this proviso. There are other options that they could have chosen for the same particular assignment. Let's get back to the reading, writing, math, science, and civics. Let's teach American history, the good and the bad. Let's teach them how we have come so far and how much further we need to go. America is not systemically racist. We do not teach unfounded theory that portrays people today as problematic due to their skin color. Do not condemn them because of the actions of their ancestors. One of the board members did mention about suicide rates being improved, going up. Being taught that you're a bad person just because of your skin color too is going to add to that dilemma. If we don't stop this now, how long will it be until 6 of our board members are going to be ousted solely because of the lightness or the whiteness of their skin and their inherent biases? Let's embrace our uniqueness and work toward the common goal, such as the Constitution states, to form a more perfect union. And the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Pamela Godwin is here to talk about CRT in the classroom.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I am the chairwoman for Lexington County Republican Party, and I am here to support Elizabeth Barnhart and Kathy Huddle and their defense of Proviso 1.93. I also support the South Carolina Freedom Caucus and their endeavors to stop CRT from being taught in our South Carolina schools. We must remember and adhere to Proviso 1.93, which requires educators not to teach CRT, and it bans education indoctrination. We have had enough. Enough is enough. We don't want to see this happen again. And I implore you, every one of you, to put policies in place that implement the banning of CRT and teachers, penalties for teachers that teach CRT. Our kids, the students, deserve better. I also congratulate the Freedom Caucus for winning this recent victory for District 1. There are more victories to come. We are watching. Thank you to all the trustees and everyone in here for their hard work in working on this issue. Thank you.
Kim Murphy is here to speak about live stream.
Good evening. I listened to a little bit of the meeting earlier at 4 o'clock when you approved the agenda, and I think Ms. Huddle, and I didn't catch it all, may have made a motion to add to the agenda live streaming of the board officers meeting where the agendas are set, and I understand that that is going to be placed on a future agenda, which I really appreciate. And Ms. Hines, thank you for taking the stand that it is a public meeting. Now, I don't know whether it is per FOIA, but thank you for making them public. I attend those meetings, which you know, along with Barbara, who is here behind me, and we are probably one of two. It came up in discussion that there was a concern possibly about the cost of staff to live stream. So that may be. So is there another platform that could be used instead? WebEx or Google Meets, I don't know. I'm not a computer person, but if there is something that would alleviate having to have a staff person there for that, that would be helpful. But if there isn't, it would go a long way towards transparency to have those live streamed. And thank you very much for considering it.
That is all that is signed up for public participation.
Thank you.
Ms.
I'm going to actually, I have something that I want to address. So we don't typically comment on public participation. However, I'm going to tonight, and I'm going to ask something of the superintendent. And I would like to clarify something to the public. We're in the very rare category of elected officials that have limitations on what we can and cannot discuss and specifically based on certain situations due to legal constraints. And I know that that is frustrating, but that is the truth. And that is regardless of our personal thoughts, and it's based on our oath of office. However, I do think that there needs to be a conversation within the board, and I would like to ask you, Dr. Ross, to add to your superintendent's report for the next meeting to discuss a couple of policies that we can discuss and may give some clarification. And those policies are policy IB on academic freedom and policy IMB on controversial materials. So I would, like I said, I would request that you put that on your superintendent's report for next time so that we can have a conversation. I know that there's a lot of conversation happening, and I would like to be able to address that to the best of our ability at that time. Ms. Barnhart.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to address the concerns of parents and members of the community that were presented. I move that the chair convene a policy review committee before the July 17th meeting to propose possible changes to policy BCB, IB, IG, GBEA, GBEB, and KEC in order to ensure compliance with the South Carolina law included in the Budget Proviso 1.93, the board's adoption of the primary stakeholder resolution, and our commitment to always put our students first, and then an agenda item be placed on the July 17th meeting for the committee to present its recommendations to the board.
Second.
Do I have any comments? I have a comment, but I'll let anyone else go first?
No,
I believe she gets to
Okay,
address
go
the
ahead,
motion.
go ahead.
Well, I just think, given recent events, we should take a more clear, concise look at these policies and how they're implemented within the district.
Any comments? Okay, go ahead.
Policy, I mean, I appreciate your suggestion for Dr. Ross to put it on the superintendent's agenda, but policy is the purview of the board. So I support Ms. Barnhart's motion that we look at these policies and do it in a policy committee so that we can speed up the process, because if we don't have any discussions about it until July 17th, then you're talking about a discussion and then a first reading and a second reading. And I like to think that no one intentionally violated the law or no one intentionally violated the policies. So by going back through the policies, we can make them crystal clear if they're not, and we can make any repercussions if people do violate them crystal clear as well.
Any comments? Mr. Hogan?
Ms. Barnhart, can you read those policies again?
That's policy BCB, board member conflict of interest, policy IB, academic freedom, policy IG, curriculum development, policy GBEA, staff ethics and conflicts of interest, policy GBEB, staff conduct and KEC, material selection and reconsideration.
Let me see, okay. And so with this motion, you want the policy committee to convene, meet, discuss, and then come back with recommendations at the next meeting?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there enough time between today, next meeting for that?
So
to-
that's one of my concerns, because we know that several staff members are going to be
Right.
gone for an extended period of time.
Even given discussions that we kind of had today on other levels, I understand, obviously, it is summertime. The staff levels, like you said, are not at what they normally would be during the year. So, I mean, if July 17th is not the, be-all, end-all, but I would like to have a policy committee to get this addressed maybe over the course of the summer so that we have something in place by the beginning of the school year to make sure that everything is.
So my thoughts on that, and my thoughts on committees in general, is that when you have a committee meeting at the district office, there are very few people that actually come to those meetings or listen to those meetings, and then you have to repeat yourself again in a board meeting. And not all board members can make policy or committee meetings due to work schedules. And I think that when we talk about policies, especially important policies, we really need the full board here. It's not that I disagree with conversations about policies, but I do disagree with having committee meetings, because then you rehash it all over again in here. And I think that by starting the conversation and the questions at our next meeting, based off of the policies that are the most related to the situation at hand, I think we're getting the process started, and I might be more amenable to discuss all of those policies at once after we have those conversations. That's just my thoughts.
I completely understand that. I also think that this has been something that's been kind of in play for, quite a few months now. So I think that given the situation, we should at least work to.
I understand that, but I also understand that there are things that we cannot. Our hands are kind of tied. So we just can't discuss much more than that. I do think that we should discuss as much as we can and get as much clarification as we can in a fully public forum. That's just my thoughts. Are there any other thoughts before I call the question?
And I'll be clear, my concern is timing, with more clear timing of when the policy could convene to the board, given a more firm, definite date past the July 17th meeting. Under, being the summer, being vacation schedules and everything else, I want to make sure the district has enough time to put their recommendations in and make sure that we have the opportunity to discuss it openly, to give enough time to digest it, to come back to have these conversations.
And to have enough time to discuss it at the meeting. And one of the things that was determined at our last board officers meeting was the July 17th meeting, and there are several complex conversations on that agenda. So for that meeting, because we've already set that agenda, I would think that we would want more time to be able to discuss those conversations. I mean, that's just my thoughts. Ms. Huddle?
That meeting's 3 weeks from now. We normally have meetings every 2 weeks, usually. The committee meetings are open to the full board. When we did them before, they're very informal. And that will keep the regular board meeting from being so long. If we have a committee meeting and nobody has to go in there with preconceived ideas, the administration's there, the board members are there, people can bring their ideas, that will move this along. Our community's upset. We're in the news. We need to resolve this. I don't think any of us want to be in the news. These parents don't want this stuff. We want to try to get this resolved before we go back to school in the fall. So I would say let's put our big britches on and let's have a committee meeting. We've got 3 weeks.
That's a great soundbite, but in reality, everybody making it to a policy meeting in the next 3 weeks with multiple staff members out for long periods of time is unlikely. So, and I'm going to stand by the fact that I think that these kinds of discussions need to happen with as much public view than a policy meeting. So I am going to call for the question. All in favor of Ms. Barnhart's motion? Motion carried. All opposed to Ms. Barnhart's motion? That motion fails 4-3.